have changed, and I'm just saying you don't actually know because it's unknowable. So why aren't you open to questions?
Interrupt me, okay? It takes you quite a bit less than 6 seconds.
They say you never forget your first love. Well, I will never forget my first hate. Tucker Carlson Tonight is one of the worst shows on television, but that is why I cannot stop watching it, and it has become a fascination of mine. I watch a show on Fox News almost every day. And if you were to watch Tucker Carlson every single day, and I don't recommend that you do, you will notice that his show is extremely repetitive. The most repetitive and predictable part of Tucker Carlson Tonight is the way Tucker interacts with his guests. The more I watch his show, the easier it becomes to predict when Tucker will cut his guest off, what he will ask, and how his guests will respond. Tucker Carlson Tonight comes across as a performance, and his guests are part of that performance. Broadly speaking, there are two types of guests on his show. Those that are on board with that performance, and those that are not. Tucker has a really weird relationship with his guests. Sadly, I don't think many of his guests understand that relationship. They seem to believe that Tucker's having them on to have a thoughtful and sincere discussion. Tucker's guests have a specific purpose, and it's not to have an interesting debate, and it's definitely not to challenge Tucker's audience into thinking harder, or at all. Tucker's face isn't red because he's deep in thought, that's just how he looks. His guests are invited on to help Tucker communicate to his audience which beliefs are good and which ones are bad. The purpose of friendly guests is to signal to his audience which beliefs are good. He allows his guests to speak uninterrupted at length, only butting in to agree or to ask a question. These questions serve as prompts to the guest. They allow Tucker to emphasize certain points and to bring the guest back on message if they drift, so that the audience can understand the message being expressed by the interview. This is more effective than simply saying the point in a monologue, because the guest discussion format gives credibility to the message. It communicates that the message is widely believed by conservative media personalities who have credibility with Tucker's audience. After all, if Tucker and Coulter both believe that immigrants are bad, then surely I should as well. The discussion format also gives the illusion that the two reached the same conclusion at that moment because it is the correct conclusion, when in fact, that guest was invited on because Tucker already knew what their views were. The questions Tucker asks are hollow, because he knows what the answers will be. This is not to say that the show is scripted, because I don't believe it is, but it might as well be. This is what those friendly guests look like. Pay attention to when and why Tucker interrupts these guests, because he does so rarely and selectively.
You know that running on the economy is a loser because, for one thing, all of the left-wing commentators are saying Trump should be talking about the economy. Please talk about the economy. Don't talk about immigration. Number two, the only argument from their side that you just played, I guess from Joe Scarborough, was to accuse people who are opposed to dumping millions of poor people on the country, driving down the wages of the working class and Joe Scarborough's maid, is to claim racism. You know, the left is so lucky that the poor countries to the south of us are Latin American countries, and we're not taking in, like, Poland's poor or you know, Eastern Europe's poor, maybe gypsies. I don't know if he would consider gypsies darker, browner than us. It has nothing to do with race until they make it so.
So you're saying that if we were taking in, wait, just to be clear about what you're saying, so you're saying if we were taking in Eastern Europeans, then the left wouldn't get to claim racism, they'd have to think of some other reason.
Yes, no, our objection is dumping lots of poor people on the country is hurting the poor people already here and the working class already here, the low-skilled workers already here. I'd like to know how many of these, of Joe Scarborough's beloved brown people, live in the houses near him as opposed to come to clean his toilet and pool.
But does it strike you that they're doing it in order to protect their own pretty good deal that they're getting, their prerogatives?
Oh, absolutely. Mass low-wage immigration is terrific for rich people.
Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report on YouTube. He's a very wise man and joins us.
That's what people really need to understand when these pieces come out and then you start looking at something that you used to love or that used to have a wonderful message about the holiday and giving and being accepted and all of those things, that they're trying to take that away from you. And it's not like they stop with one thing, right? They find something, they kind of destroy that, and they'll move on to everything else that we love. So, you know, eventually they'll move on to sitcoms that we love, whether it's Seinfeld for, you know, doing, as I said earlier, it's easier to destroy than create.
Well,
and that's what they're just going to keep doing, and I think what we have to do is create.
That's such a smart point.
And if your job all day long is to write pieces that actually destroy the stories that we're built on, and then don't offer an alternative. I mean, that's the thing. They never offer.
Show The View. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. So, Mark, the scientific conversation on warming always begins the same way, which is, I'm a good person and you're not, so shut up and obey.
Who said that to you? Who talks like that? Tucker has so many imaginary debates with people. I'm probably going to make a future video about it.
This is a global phenomenon. It's happening all around the world, and it's happening in France, where the French government has just said, we want to slow down climate change, so we're taxing gasoline. And there's been this kind of revolution in response from the left and the right. The entire French middle class, tell me if I'm misreading this, has risen up to say, no, this is a scam. You're punishing us under the guise of making the planet better, and we're not putting up with it anymore. Do you think this is part of a global change in the way populations respond to climate hectoring?
Yes, I think so. Al Gore's house in Tennessee has a carbon footprint 20 times bigger than the average American home. But that's because he's being virtuous and using his carbon footprint to save the planet, whereas you, Joe Schlub of 27B Elm Street, need to give up your washing machine and your dryer and be beating your clothes dry with the native women down on the rocks by the river, beating your loincloth dry.
Capture fish, so juicy, sweet.
So let me ask you a sincere question. If you really believed that climate was the greatest challenge we face, why would you even allow private planes to exist? I'm sincere in that question.
So Tucker has to tell his guests a lot that his questions are sincere, because they come across as so stupid that he has to remind them that he's being serious.
Because I think it is actually a form of class war. It's a way, then within developed countries, it's a way for elites to tell people that, when it's just Al Gore and the Prince of Wales flying around having climate conferences, everything's fine. But the minute Mr. and Mrs. Joe Schmo want to take a vacation in Florida, then the whole planet's going to broil. It's an elite thing.
Exactly.
Nobody takes...
Notice how these guests speak uninterrupted at length. Tucker only cuts them off to agree, to emphasize something they said or suggested, or to ask a leading question that is nearly always answered in the affirmative. The point of the question isn't to challenge his guest, and certainly not his audience. The question serves as a prompt. It signals to his guest what he wants emphasized, and signals to his audience what the point of the interview is. In short, the friendly guest and their interaction with Tucker tells Tucker's audience what they are supposed to believe. The second category of guest is the hostile guest. The purpose of the hostile guest is to signal which beliefs his audience should dismiss. Tucker does this by interrupting them before they get a chance to develop their case, distracting them with absurd and loaded questions, and frustrating them with insults and laughter to break their focus. And he's pretty good at it. It works on most of them. I'll offer some advice to hostile guests later in the video. But for now, observe the contrast between the two categories of guests. It's like night and day.
I'm describing what will happen if this continues. And I'm asking you a simple question. Hold on. I'm asking you a simple question about the rate of climate change.
So you
said that it would be happening, but that rate has accelerated because of human activity. And I'm asking you very simply.
The word accelerated is an understatement. Okay, it's happening extraordinarily
I'm asking you a simple
fast.
question, and because the science is settled, I hope you can answer it in simple terms, which is, without human activity, how long would it have taken for us to reach this level of warmth in our climate?
It's not clear that it would have happened. In other words, humans have changed the climate so drastically that we have almost certainly avoided another ice age. There would have been another ice age, ain't going to happen because of you and me. So the sooner we get to work on this problem, the problem.
When would it have happened?
When would the next ice age have happened?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Without human activity, what would the process... Look, here's the point that I hope our viewers can understand. I'm not in any way denying that the climate is changing. I'm utterly open to the possibility that the change is caused by man's activity. I'm merely calling into question your claim that all of this is settled, that that we know precisely what is happening and why, and that anyone who asks pointed questions about it is a denier and ought to be imprisoned or shouted off the stage.
No, that was your word. That's you guys. That's not my claim, and I really.
Would you like me to read your quote that people who disagree with you ought to potentially go to jail? You said that.
Okay.
And I'm just saying,
I'm not sure that's
skepticism
exactly what I
baked
said,
into
Mr. Carlson.
science?
We can talk about that shortly, but
Is it appropriate to jail the guys from Enron? Was it appropriate to jail the people in the cigarette industry who promised it wasn't addictive, etc.?
Okay.
Look, my only point is, shouldn't we be encouraging people to ask honest questions, which I am doing, and you don't seem to have the answers to those questions.
Okay, I got to disagree with you. I claim I do have the answers.
Okay.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Why aren't you concerned about it? Don't you have 4 children? Why aren't you concerned about climate change?
That's why I'm having you on. Look, you don't reach correct conclusions in science or politics or any other field unless you can ask honest answers without being shouted down by people like you.
But I know what you mean. So
no, I do mean ask. I want to know what would happen without human activity. The climate change. No, and my point is, what would the climate look like right now without human activity?
It would have looked like it did in 1750. Britain would not be very well suited to growing. Yes, Britain would not be very well suited to growing grapes as it is today. French winemakers would not be buying land to the north as they are now. People who plan to run ski resorts would still be able to do it in Europe. And so the climate change and the parasites.
You're using the language of politics. Look, you're not a scientist, as you know. You're a popularizer,
and I just think, and that's fine. Economics.
But so I'm just saying, look, to the extent that you prevent people, if you prevent people from having an honest conversation, you're doing a grave disservice to science. Don't you think that?
So you asked how long it would be before, what the climate would be like if humans weren't involved right now. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right.
So
at what point would it have changed? And I'm just saying, you don't actually know because it's unknowable.
So why aren't you open to questions? This is how long it takes you to interrupt me, okay? It takes you quite a bit less than 6 seconds. So the climate would be like it was in 1750.
Enrique Morones is the founder of Border Angels, a pro-immigration group, and he joins us. Enrique, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Tucker.
So I understand that you're for more immigration into the country, but I can't imagine you would support people walking across Mexico and just showing up, expecting to be let in. If that were to happen a lot, we would no longer be a country. So what should we do with these people?
Well, Mexico is not a hostile nation, like you mentioned earlier.
Of course
and
it
the people that are coming.
I'm sorry, I win with superior knowledge here. The
no,
Mexican,
no, superior arrogance.
Of course it is.
I know you're from San Diego, and your racism and ignorance is very well known.
Right? Okay.
Yeah,
Look,
La Jolla Country Day,
the Mexican government
Carlson
has given instructions to people. I've seen them with my own eyes on how to get across the border. But the point is, this group of people could be stopped any time by the Mexican government, which, again, you feel the need to make apologies for, but they detain people all the time in their country from Central America, as you know. But they're not detaining these people because they say they're going to El Norte. So they're a hostile power. But why should we have to accept anybody who comes here?
Most people aren't coming to the United States. Most undocumented people go elsewhere. They have no desire to come here. Of the 250 million undocumented people in the world today, the United States has 11 million. And that flow has shifted dramatically, dropped 40% in the last 5.5 years. But
why should we take any? No, but you're missing it. Why should we take any? There are a lot of people who want to come here legally.
Yeah, but there's no way for these people to come in legally. And the United States interfering in these countries, the demand for the drugs, invading sovereign land like Iraq, or interfering in the civil wars of Central America, that causes people to flee. The U.S. should be more welcoming.
So our sins are the reason this is. So you hate America, is what you're saying. So these people are coming here to punish us for bad things we did in Honduras?
No.
Are you representative of people on the left? Is everybody this dumb?
The United States has a large responsibility. And when they invade sovereign lands, when they take from sovereign lands, they should be a more welcoming nation, and they are not.
But
there's no legal way for the people to come in. They're desperate. People are crossing borders all over the world.
I just want to have a rational conversation.
They should be able to have a rational
conversation. They should be able.
Yes, we should have one.
All right.
Yeah, we should have a
Get back to me when you can explain what we did to Honduras to deserve this.
The difference between the first set of guests and the second should be obvious. The hostile guests in the second group were repeatedly interrupted, belittled, mocked, and laughed at. Tucker often asks them ridiculous and irrelevant questions, and tries to get them to defend things they do not believe, and to frustrate them so that they cannot think clearly. The point of the hostile guest is the opposite of the friendly guest. Tucker is signaling to his audience what they are not supposed to believe, or what beliefs are bad. This is important to realize because it undermines everything Tucker says about wanting to have a deep debate, or a rational debate. He doesn't want to debate you. If you have good beliefs, he provides you with a platform, prompts to keep you on message, and compliments and affirmation to boost your credibility. If you have bad beliefs, you are interrupted before you can build your argument and ask distracting questions. Sometimes, if Tucker loses himself in an argument with a guest, he will simply state his point so that it's clear anyway to his audience.
Look, here's the point.
The friendly guest, more often than not, follows the hostile guest chronologically. This suggests that friendly guests also serve a therapeutic purpose for Tucker's audience. The hostile guest gets the audience annoyed with bad ideas, and the friendly guest comes in to restore logic and order. This emotional feedback, where hostile guests cause anger and tension, and the friendly guest brings relief, helps enforce the messaging, and makes his audience emotionally invested in those views. Also notice that Tucker only ever has one guest on at a time, which is unusual for talk show hosts, even at Fox News. This is because having more than one guest on would prevent a friendly guest from getting their point across, and interfere with Tucker's ability to interrogate his hostile guest. He does not want a debate on his show to happen, even by accident. Tucker admits the majority of my argument in an interview with Julian Epstein. Epstein was supposed to be a hostile guest, but rewrote the script by agreeing with Tucker. How Tucker responds is interesting and comes close to defining the purpose of his show.
But I think your basic point is correct, which is that we are sleeping while Rome burns with respect to China, and we have not taken seriously the fact that they don't play by the rules. We have...
Wait, so I'm waiting to jump in with a hostile question, but you're making my case for me. You've taken all of my questions and reformatted them into statements because I think you're absolutely right. So,
now, what on earth are you supposed to do if you find out that you are a hostile guest on the show? Which you'll probably know in advance. But how can you prepare for someone who's constantly interrupting you and laughing at you and asking you ridiculous questions? Well, I think there are some things you can do. And some guests have already done these things, and some do them better than others. So these are some of my suggestions for you. Concede small details. Tucker will want to get you bogged down in silly details and straw men that take time to defend and miss the important points. Concede those points or ignore them. Swinging at every pitch is a mistake because it means you are playing his game. He will not let you dodge his questions easily, so you should try to answer him if he asks the same question over and over. But answer quickly, and don't be too worried about conceding a single point. This way you can move on to something else that is hopefully more important. If you said something silly in your past, just drop it, or you'll never get a chance to say anything else. This is best done by simply just representing yourself. Many of the guests on Tucker's show are representing someone else, such as the Democratic Party or a specific candidate. Most of these guests struggle because they are forced to justify something that someone else said, and so they cannot just speak for themselves. Someone speaking for themselves can quickly abandon something stupid they've said in the past or justify it, whereas someone representing someone else struggles to do this. One example of a guest who simply could not concede a small detail because she was there representing someone else was a Bernie Sanders surrogate, who was asked to defend Bernie traveling on private planes.
But if you really believe what you're saying, and if Bernie Sanders really believes what he's saying, why is he flying on private planes? I mean, it's a sincere question.
So let's not get distracted from the real issue here.
No. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to let you off that easily.
Yeah, deflect. That's what I'm going to do. Don't tell him we're deflecting.
Why is it not a real issue? If climate change, as Katie Church has told us, is really the only issue that matters, then why aren't we living like it's the only issue that matters?
Because it really comes down to the industry. If the industry wants to make planes that exist off of renewable energy rather than oil and gas, then we will all be able to live on this planet. It starts at the industry level, not the consumer. You know, it's really not fair to put the tax on the individual.
It's not fair for someone who's telling us the planet's being destroyed to live in a way that suggests that he actually believes the planet's being destroyed. So I honestly really don't get it. So if you're Al Gore and you say, nothing is more important than climate change, I'm a better person than you are because I care more than you. By the way, I have one of the largest houses in Nashville and I fly private and I take a Suburban to the private airport, to the FBO. Why should I be okay? I mean, sincerely, why is that?
Just let it go. It's not that important. Just say, Al Gore is a hypocrite, and so is Bernie Sanders. I wish they would stop, but I can't make them stop. Oh well, now here's my next point. It would be very easy to do, but you can't abandon them because she used to get paid to represent Bernie Sanders. Don't be that person. The second thing you should do is stay calm. Tucker's questions become much easier to manage when you don't let them anger you. It is also possible to stand up for yourself and what you believe without getting angry. This is what that might look like.
Why? Because why? Why don't you like her?
Well, I thought you'd never ask. You must have me on more often and tell me what you think, and then you won't have to hear my...
I know, but I'm...
Anything about his life.
Now, excuse me, sir. You can either ask me on and ask my opinion, or you may not. But I don't have to be here if you're going to take that attitude.
Well, you could leave.
You spent the first half by saying I had no right to the opinion you'd asked me on to express. Now you're tiring me out.
Now, neither of those examples are from Tucker's show, but they show what a calm and quick response might look like. Mocking him, or reminding him that questions should be asked in order to be answered, might give you space to speak, or at least show his more fair-minded viewers that Tucker does not interview people in good faith. I also just wanted to include Hitch in my first video somehow. There are also lots of examples of guests who think they are standing up for themselves when they are actually embarrassing themselves. Max Boot is a useful example here.
You know, Tucker, this is pure sophistry on your part.
It's not sophistry, it's a sincere question. Why don't you answer
Will you let me finish? Will you let me answer your question, Tucker? I will be the first to admit that sometimes you have to make common cause with repugnant regimes, and that's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did with Joseph Stalin when you have common goals. But we do not share common goals with Russia. We do not share common goals with Russia because Russia is trying to further the murderous Bashar Assad regime. They are trying to further Iranian hegemony in Syria. That is not our goal. Iran believes in death to Israel. They believe in death to America. We should not be cooperating with them. We should not become complicit in Russian war crimes.
Okay, let me just ask you factual questions. And
Russia, by the way, is also undermining our electoral process, which you don't seem to care about, Tucker.
Okay, the moral preening and the generalizations are tiresome. Let me ask you a specific question. You say,
your lack of moral judgment is tiresome to me. Your lack of moral judgment about what Russia is up to, I find to be offensive.
This is why nobody takes you seriously. But I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself by answering this question. You say
Tucker,
Iran is a primary threat to us.
You're the one who's not taken seriously.
Tell me how many Americans in the United States have been murdered by terrorists backed by Iran since 9/11.
Oh, so you're taking the pro-Iranian line, essentially. Is that right?
Well, that's
what about the fact that hundreds of American troops...
You're humiliating yourself, Max.
Hundreds
Why don't you answer the question?
Notice that anger and condemnations do not work on Tucker because he does not care. And he has heard it all before. Taking him seriously is a mistake. So relax, stay calm, and act as if his show is a joke. Because it is. Also, consider using his own tactics against him. If he asks a silly question, laugh at him. Mock him by imitation. This will allow his audience to see how obnoxious and destructive the things Tucker does are. Tucker is also a very emotional man, who I suspect has a short temper. He should be easy to bump off message or to provoke into a tantrum. The third thing, and this is very important, is to just be prepared. If you're not very knowledgeable on what Tucker covers, or you believe he will ask you about, then you should decline to appear. You will leave frustrated and wondering what the point of the interview was. You won't gain any useful exposure, and your interview won't go viral, at least not in the way you would like. And you will likely set your own cause back by allowing Tucker to co-opt you into his narrative building. You will be the punchline of pro-Tucker clickbait videos entitled, Tucker Owns Idiot with Facts and Logic. Don't let that happen to you. If you don't know what you're talking about, don't go on his freaking show. Prepare for the obvious questions. Prepare quick and witty responses because you don't have a lot of time. Tucker will cut you off, so if you cannot make a point without a lot of background knowledge, then it's not a point you can make. If you can't deal with that, don't go on the show. You will not get an opportunity to speak at length and undermine Tucker's project. I have seen him drop people from coverage entirely. Be fast or be somewhere else. One element of preparation that is probably not as important is don't come with a whole lot of studies and data. The studies and data obviously aren't useless, but they have limited rhetorical value on Tucker's show. Because his audience just isn't going to believe you, and they're definitely not going to read the study, because nobody reads studies. If you and Tucker disagree on something about data, or numbers, or a study, his audience is just going to believe him and not you. So while it's good to know the data, citing them is not going to do you any good. Just know enough to know that you clearly aren't mistaken. And don't cite think tanks or universities, because his audience does not care. One example of a guest who was really prepared for Tucker Carlson's show was Ian Samuel, and you could see how his preparation annoyed Tucker Carlson.
Can and cannot vote. The Constitution doesn't assign that responsibility.
Would you be okay with Would you be okay with California saying anybody from Russia, any Russian intelligence agent who wants to influence our election, go ahead?
Well, I think I would not, but I would not on the merits, right? Of course I wouldn't on the merits, because I would draw the line differently. I would draw the line at residents, people who live in a place and intend to remain. A very common concept in our law.
But
It's true that they may have decided as a practical matter to draw the line a little more over-inclusive, but I would note that everybody who lives in San Francisco for whatever period is subject to the laws there, and so it's not actually crazy to suggest that they should have some input onto what those laws are going to be. And again, that's historically normal.
So we just had a Russian intelligence agent arrested yesterday. She's now in jail without bail. Her crime, as described by the federal government, is trying to influence America without registering under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. What did she do wrong? She was a long-term resident of this country. She was involved in a romantic relationship with an American. She spoke English. She had a vested interest in this country, and yet she's in jail without bail. Would you defend her?
Well, I think that there's a great deal of difference between a person who is an actual spy versus a person who believes that this is where they live.
No one's alleging she's a spy. No, wait, hold on.
Sure.
No one's alleging she's a spy. She's not accused of stealing anything, of spying on anybody. She's accused, I read the indictment, and you should too. Okay. She's accused merely of trying to influence this country without registering. So what did she do wrong, and why aren't you leaping to her defense? Oh, because she's not voting Democrat.
No,
That's why, isn't
I think for as far as I know, she might. I have no idea. But what she did wrong is she violated an actual federal statute that prohibits, and perhaps that statute is unwise. But what is true is that the Constitution assigns to each state the decision to decide who is going to vote in that state's elections.
But beneath the statute is a principle, and you've changed the principle like 4 times. First, you said they have to like the United States, but then you said, no, not really. Then you said they have to have lived here for a long time. No, not really. And now you're saying what? If you violate a law, so I'm sure you're for enforcing all federal immigration law. But you're not.
I am comfortable with the idea that anybody who is subject to the laws of the United States and resides here in the ordinary sense should have an input into the political process.
The fourth and most important point, or suggestion, is simply don't let yourself be used by Tucker. The point of him inviting you on his show is to demonstrate which opinions are bad. Show his audience that your opinions are reasonable, and analogies may help here. Appeal to emotions. Tucker's audience is very emotional, and his views are part of their identity. Appeal to those emotions and identities. For example, appeal to Christianity, or the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, or American history, those sorts of things. One guest who does this well is Chris Hahn. While he doesn't answer Tucker's question the way I would have, he still does well.
So, Chris, before we even get to all that, Sherrod Brown from Ohio, who's been endorsed by NARAL, by the way, is lecturing us on Jesus. Do you think Sherrod Brown's a little bit closer to Jesus than, say, I am?
Well, Matthew 25 applies here, don't you think? I mean, that's what he was quoting. We have people who are fleeing for their lives, who are in desperate need, who want to come to this country and seek asylum legally, by the way, by presenting themselves at the border.
Before you roll right into your talking point, hold on. Before you get to the script, let me just, if you could just address my question, though. I mean, is that the new standard? Do you think it's a fair standard? This is not something that I have introduced into this. This is Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio is lecturing us about how he's on Jesus' team and we're not. Is that a fair form of political discourse? Is this a theocracy to assess what Jesus would do first?
No, I think we're pointing out the hypocrisy on the right that likes to claim that they are Christians, yet they ignore the teachings of Christ.
So I would have been tempted to answer Tucker's first question a little differently. I probably would have said, I don't care how close you are with God. Maybe you could ask me a serious question since we don't have a lot of time. But I think Hahn is smart here by emphasizing a different point, which is that many Christians pick and choose which parts of the Bible they believe in when it is convenient for them. When Tucker tries to get him to answer questions like, are we a theocracy now? Hahn stays focused and says that the point being made isn't that we should do what Jesus said, only that the Bible is cited opportunistically. I think Tucker wanted his audience to believe that Democrats signing the Bible is ridiculous because the Bible has no place in politics. Which is weird coming from a Fox News anchor, but whatever. But Hahn doesn't let Tucker steer him, and instead articulates a different point. He doesn't let Tucker's silly questions dominate the narrative. The last suggestion I have is to be unpredictable, almost to the point of absurdity. I really wish someone would go on his show and give bizarre one-word answers, or ask questions that have no clear bearing on the issue at hand. Above all, I wish someone would make that weird, confused-looking face he does all the time. Someone should make this face while he speaks, and see how he likes it. You probably think this is a still frame of his face, but it's not. It's actually a video with the audio taken out that's been running the whole time. See? His face never moves! There was a very recent guest who I think did everything on my list. Should serve as a model for future guests. Her name was Rochelle Ritchie, and watch closely how she deals with Tucker.
About that. What is the speaker's position on keeping troops in Afghanistan?
Well, I don't know what her mission is as far as keeping troops in Afghanistan. And
you just said that she doesn't have a role in deciding whether or not our troops remain in Afghanistan. So why was she going there?
Why can't she go there? Why can't she go there and thank our men and women in uniform? Why can't she? Why can't she go there and meet on the ground with some of our officials?
I'm not proposing that we bar her from doing it, and she's not barred, and I guess she can. Okay. But you're not answering my question, which is, if it's so important to end the shutdown, and I think it probably is, then why wouldn't she stay here until she negotiates an end to the shutdown? Why would she leave?
I think that Pelosi as well as Schumer have had 3 opportunities put in front of the president for him to have funding for his wall. You remember in January of 2018, they offered him $25 billion. In February of 2018, he was offered $25 billion over 10 to 12 years. They gave him an installment of $2.5 billion, and he still decided to shut down the government. Last time that they sat down and have a negotiation,
as an adult question, why would she be mad about this? It probably is fair, actually. She should stay. This isn't helping anybody, this shutdown. I mean it. Why not just stay and figure it out? Okay, so now she had this bad idea to go to Afghanistan to thank our troops who are serving in a war that she's not sure whether she supports or not. But why not just stay here and... No, it's not. No, it's totally real.
No, it is real, but it's annoying to me because we're sitting here talking about a woman taking a trip. She's not going now, so we can all really just get over it.
I hope you can see from the video that Tucker Carlson tonight is a really bad show, and his guests are really only a small part of that ridiculous performance. Carlson has lots of problems. He's flagrantly racist and a boring, uninformed idiot. But how he expresses his messages by using his guests as instruments is less obvious, I think, but is emphasized in this video. If his hostile guests would just prepare better, Tucker would have a lot more difficulty in getting his points across. Unfortunately, I don't expect any of his guests to watch this video, or for Tucker to reform his ways. Thanks for watching.
Shut up, racist.